Drawing is fun, or at least it's supposed to be. But frequently it seems like it's not. It comes to bite us in the backside when we sit down to work on something. As excited as we may be to dive into the idea, when we sit down to work on it, it rears its ugly head. And so now as I plod along through Inktober, putting together all these myriad drawings, I'm finding that certain things are taking root, that my sketching time is vastly improving my joy as I work through these projects. And yet, it's not always fun. It's an interesting thing though, right? It's something that we get into because we enjoy it. Nobody starts drawing because they want to make money drawing, right? People start drawing because drawing's exciting, drawing is fun. Maybe someone in your life did it and you feel pulled into it because of that. I got into drawing largely because my father brought home drawings from his journeys abroad. He drew these wonderful little pen drawings of toucans and salamanders and lizards and bugs from all of these crazy places that he visited when he was flying. And so drawing felt like a way to explore places that you couldn't actually get to. As a child, I couldn't go to Korea or Laos or Cambodia or South America. But I could draw things from those places. I could explore them in some capacity by seeing how my pen or my pencil tried to replicate that trunk or that body or that set of mandibles that was terrifying. These different things allowed me to explore different worlds. Greetings, my name is Zach and welcome to the session. I hope that you'll be drawing along on something of your own, and if you are, please leave that in the comments below. I'd love to see what you are working on today. As I mentioned earlier, I'm plugging along on Inktober. This is the third prompt, which is Path. I started on the first with just this sleeping cute little monster guy. The second, I had my character dealing with this giant spider, and I seem to be falling into this journey of this little character, who will actually take far more form and shape in the next piece and then forever onward, which you'll get to see some of those as they unroll. I didn't intend this. I had just figured I would pursue Inktober as I always have, which is just a set of disparate drawings that are exploring whatever the prompts are. This one, no. I decided after the first drawing that I'm going to be following the exploits of this little girl. You can't even tell that it's a girl yet, but in the next one you will, and forever on after that it seems a little bit more apparent. So this is a little girl named Andorra who is exploring in kind of an elemental realm, a place she found herself in her youth, and it's a pretty unrelenting area. Right now you can start to see like, oh my goodness, she's on this little Tears of the Kingdom inspired area with floating islands and jutting cliffs as they go out into nothingness. Truth be told, Tears of the Kingdom is just the most recent version of this. Places like this have existed in mythology and stories for a long time. One of my first encounters with something like this was Dalaran from World of Warcraft way back in the day. And it was a lovely idea, but that wasn't even the first time I'd run into it. It was just the first time I got to explore it, this idea of floating islands. And I think there's something ethereal to us as humans, like we like to explore these unknown areas, these unquantifiables. And if you go back way further, you get to this idea of the Earth being flat, of the edge of the world. You could go to this area where you could fall off and where it was terrifying, where we had to contemplate our existence in this bleak, black unknown that is the cosmos. And this is just the most recent set of versions of that. So my little character is having to explore this terrifying realm on the edge of nothing. And I don't know if this links back to like storytelling, world building in the little childish me having to think about how I would interact with these worlds and these places that my father was visiting. But I think it's pretty common for art to do those things. We often vicariously live through our art in some way. And as I've been writing more, I've been learning that this is actually a pretty common thing for writers. That sometimes writers, especially perhaps those who've grown up in subpar environments, they tend to write characters that are the characters they wish they were. They wish that they could be this powerful wizard or this powerful person in this scenario. And so their characters tend to embody that, especially you see that in protagonists. In Name of the Wind, you see this a lot. The main character is so good at everything he does, even though he's a child who probably shouldn't have this set of skills at that age. And perhaps for the author in that situation, that's the ability for him to explore what he would have rather his life been like. Now, I don't know a lot about that author. I'm just kind of assuming based on the human qualities and the things that I pulled at when I was reading through the book. And this seems a pretty common thing. I know most of us, when we started drawing in middle or high school, we drew OCs, right? Original characters, and we often inserted them into fandoms that we adored, fandoms that we loved. I loved Naruto growing up. I grew up saying it Naruto because I was, not exposed to the anime. And in fact, maybe when I started reading it, the anime didn't even exist yet because I picked it up in probably the first 20 or 30 chapters. But rest assured, middle school me definitely thought about, if I existed in this universe, what would I want to do? What would I want to be? And it was a lot of fun. It was fun to play with those ideas and those concepts. So I'm 36 now, by the way, which means that when I started following that manga, it was at least 22, 24 years ago. I'm going to look it up real quick and just check when the first couple chapters came out so I can get my dates right. Alright, so looking into it really quickly, it looks like it was Shonen Jump, released in the United States. Volume 9 or 10 is when I started reading One Piece and Naruto. Which would have been 2003. I was unable in 5 minutes to figure out exactly when. So I can definitively say that at least 2003 I was reading these two. That would have actually put me in high school. So I'm not sure if I did start earlier or not, but either way, it's about that same realm. Rest assured that 2003 me would have been putting together characters that I thought fit into that environment. And I think that's pretty common. I think most of us do this in our early years when we start, working through art. And if it's not into an anime, a manga, a fan base of some kind, it's often in video games. When you design your avatars in a particular video game, you are inserting yourself. And yes, I think there is something artistic about that. There's something artistic about working on building a character and putting that time into a video game. And I think that's why you get a lot of overlap with artistic people are generally involved in video games in some capacity. Not always, and certainly it doesn't go the other way. If you are really involved and love video games, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be an artist. Although it does seem to mean that you enjoy or appreciate artistry in some sense. Very rarely do I run into people who are huge into video games who don't at least have a mild respect for and adoration of art in some sense, even if it's just video game art. But very seldom actually is it just video game art either. Let's jump back into talking about the art taking place in the background, since this is supposed to be a sketchbook session. I've really enjoyed working on all these little mountainy forms, and primarily because I realized a while back that hatching, using my vertical strokes in this case primarily, to curve around the components of the stone, of the sides of these cliff faces, makes it look much more realistic, makes it look much more interesting. I guess realistic isn't quite the right word. I'm not going for realism here, I'm going for intrigue, for interesting. And having all of these little hatching lines follow the contour of the stone faces makes it look interesting, makes it look different than just shading it in with pencil and what that would look like, or trying to go for something that is incredibly accurate with the pen. Pen is its own beast, it's its own tool, and it doesn't do everything well. This is truly the case for almost all artistic media. They each have their things that they do well. There probably are some that can do everything. I mean, if you're working in digital art, you could technically, since you're just working with pixels, do just about everything, but that's kind of boring. Tangible media like ink allows you to do certain things really well, and other things not so well. So leaning into those particularities, is that even the right word? Leaning into those specific qualities makes your time with ink much more enjoyable and much more interesting. So I'm really enjoying all the stone that I've been putting in these pieces, and I've really been enjoying how those things are coming out. And a lot of that has just been practice and been looking into how other people handle things. There are so many resources out there right now. There's a lot of people that I follow on Instagram that are ink artists specifically. In fact, there were 2 Kickstarters in the last 6 months that I've backed because they're just pen and ink artists and they do really cool work, and I want to support them, and I also kind of want their work in my library here so that I have things to reference. And that's a wonderful thing about the artistic community right now. If you can spend time on YouTube or Instagram and not get bogged down with how pitiful you see your own skills in comparison to these wonderful artists, there is so much to glean, so many things that you can pull from all those resources. And I often try to do that. I think that it's important to consume a certain amount of art daily. Mark Brené talks about this a lot. He has a wonderful set of classes and a good YouTube channel, and my buddy and I have been following him for at least 20 years. But he often talks about how you need to consume a certain amount of art daily. He is also careful to mention that you need to be careful that you don't spend too much time on Instagram or other platforms simply doom scrolling down the ever-present continuation of artists that you likely consider better than yourselves. But maybe for 15 or 20 minutes a day to set a timer and just go through those things is really, really, really beneficial. And I've tried to, at least on one of my Instagram profiles, I've tried to only like images that are going to be beneficial to me later. So that might sound a little bit weird, but the goal is that if I go into my drawing profile on my Instagram and I look at my recent activity and I go to the pieces that I've liked, all of them are pieces that are of benefit to me. They're pieces where I enjoy how this person represented this. I like how they simplified this female character. I like how they handled the cross-hatching or hatching on this ink piece. I like how they represented this creature. All of that is a resource for me, and I can go back and look at it. Now, I've got another account on there too for my painting work where I can be a little bit, more haphazard with what I like. I can support people that I want to, but I also see the drawing one as a resource for me. It's a mass of files and images that are beneficial to me that I can learn from. And that's the thing, is if you take the time and effort to actually let those things be resources, they are immense resources. In the same way that the internet gives us access to so many things nowadays, if you take advantage of those kinds of things, they're a massive boon, a massive benefit to you. So I would highly encourage you to do something similar. I think that it's really important as an artist to consume art. Imagine being a musician who didn't listen to other people's music and just sat in a corner and wrote their own stuff. That happens with artists a lot. A lot of artists that don't want to look at other people's art, or when they do, they're only overcome with the disparity between them and the other people. We have to be careful. We're not racing all these other artists. They are, in some sense, in competition with you only if you're trying to have a career in the field and you're applying for the exact same things that they are. But for most of us looking on YouTube and on Instagram, that is not the case. We are not up to that kind of work yet. We're not at that caliber. And if you get to the point where you are, let that standard of work challenge you and push you to be better and better and better. In the meantime, appreciate that we live in a world that gives us access to all that, because it wasn't always that way. Prior to the internet, when I was growing up, we pretty much saw art in art books. And part of the reason that we grew up copying art so much is because, if you bought a video game, you had the little booklet, the instruction booklet that came with it, and it was a treasure trove of art from that video game. I copied loads of Mega Man artwork, Donkey Kong artwork, Bomberman artwork, because those were some of the only things I had access to. The internet wasn't available in the way that it is today until I was really getting into high school. And so we just didn't have access to this plethora of images, and we had to mine what we had. So I drew out of eyewitness books and lots of reptiles and things like that as well. It's easy to be overwhelmed by the amount of resources out there, though. Very easy to be overwhelmed. But we can choose how we see that. We can choose to be overwhelmed. We can choose to be resentful or upset with how good all these other artists are. Or we can choose to be thankful. We can choose to see it for what it is, which is this amazing boon that we have access to. And I don't want to sound condescending when I say see it for what it is, because that does have a tone of you're seeing it wrong, fix it. And that's not accurate. It's more just we have the ability to manipulate our perspective on the thing. We can decide to be thankful for the world that we live in that capacity, or we can choose to be resentful. We can't change the world around us, but we can change exactly how we're perceiving it and what we're taking in. And I've just found that with my natural tendency towards ludicrous levels of pessimism, that my happiness, my joy quotient is increased by being thankful for those things. Reminding myself that it's wonderful that I live in a world where I can look up a tutorial on how to do something. I don't have to figure it out myself. And that's a lovely thing. Now, sometimes it's fun to sit there and tinker, but I still like to build my Legos using the instructions. It makes my life more pleasant. And with how tough life can be sometimes, finding little pockets of pleasant is a wonderful, wonderful addition. So I hope you are working through something artistically on your own. I really sincerely hope you're working through your Inktober sketches as well. If you haven't started, I know that we're quite a ways into the month, but don't fret, pick up with where we are if you want to, or just do the corresponding amount of days. It's a joy to take part in, and I didn't finish the first couple years I did either, so if you need that as you're okay to not finish them all, that's fine, but I would encourage you to keep working as long as you can. It's good to be pushed out of your normal comfort zones. It's good to work with a medium that's not normal for you, and there's just a lot of joy to be had there. So I hope this was beneficial for you. As always, thanks for listening. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Have a good one, y'all. See you soon.